Convinced that the storms were a freak accident, that the rains would soon return, residents could not imagine that they had entered a battle that would last a decade.
The next morning, they'd still have that dust settling in the air, but there would be the sunshine and all again, but then everything would just be covered in dirt. Everything was full of dust. If you were cooking a meal, you'd end up with dust in your food, and you would feel it in your teeth. You'd start to eat, and when you would drink water or something, you would grit down, and you always felt like you had grit between your teeth, you know. It felt terrible.
The next day, when Mother and my grandmother started cleaning out the house, they were taking the dirt out in buckets full. They were scooping it up onto wheat scoops, which are pretty good size scoops, and carrying it out into the yard.
The dust was just like face powder. It was so heavy and thick. It wasn't like sand. It was just real heavy, like face powder, only it was real dark, almost black.
To the astonishment of residents, the dust kept coming. In 1932, the Weather Bureau reported 14 dust storms. The next year, the number climbed to 38. People tried to protect themselves by hanging wet sheets in front of doorways and windows to filter the dirt. They stuffed window frames with gummed tape and rags. But keeping the fine particles out was impossible. The dust permeated the tiniest cracks and crevices.
We just had a lot of dirt. I just grew up with it, thought that's what life was all about.
The drought persisted, made worse by some of the hottest summers on record. Windmills provided drinking water from deep wells, but the fields were bone dry. Still confident that the rains would return, farmers continued to plow. Out of this blast of dust, one observer wrote, the men of western Kansas whistle and go right on sowing wheat.
If Dad was in the field, we were always afraid. You know, we didn't know whether Dad could get in or not because the dust was so bad. Dad always had a tendency, like most men did, I guess. They would stay in the field until the storm got there. So Mom and we kids were at home watching, waiting for Dad to come in, thinking he would surely come before the dirt hit. And usually he didn't. And then we'd have to worry about him getting in. And worry was part of my makeup, so I worried about him.
(1934). The storms were coming with alarming frequency. Residents believed they could pinpoint a storm's origins by the color of the dust. Black from Kansas, red from Oklahoma, gray from Colorado or New Mexico. As the storms rampaged across the land, they unleashed another destructive force.
I can remember when Dad had a good wheat crop growing, and it blew terribly hard for 2 days. At the end of that 2 days, static electricity, the electricity in the air, had completely killed the wheat crop. All of that green wheat had just turned brown and was dead.
I had a little garden, and I had me some watermelons, and I'd carry water, the bucket out and water. And I remember went out that evening, water, and I had some little watermelon about as long as a little finger, just pretty and shiny, with little fuzz on them, you know. And went out the next morning after one of them sandstorms, and there the watermelons, vines whipped around them little melons, just black as tar. It completely just, because of static electricity and then that continuous wind.